a lot of other biofuels out there too. You can use moringa or whatever you can get oil from. Even if you produce your own, you must still pay taxes on that. We're not free.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine.
And I do welcome you this evening, this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are on this planet. I am so grateful you're joining me today. Thank you for listening. The IPCC now calling to dismantle capitalism to save the planet from runaway warming. Facebook purges 800 accounts with millions of followers. Stocks are crashing. Isn't that convenient? Snowstorms in the American mountains termed the American snow globe. A couple of ideas to run through today. The intensification of this grand solar minimum, at least in the first wave going up to 2024 and 2025, is absolutely here. It's intensifying, and all these distractions around you are an indication that the bottom is falling out and the damage control mechanism is in place, and they're going to try to fizzle and bubble the media so you do not even want to look anywhere else except the stories that are just really so almost Hollywood-esque, attention-grabbing. You can get people to fight. They're controlling the narrative between people. You should look past all that. You really need to look at the changes that are happening. What was forecasted is happening. The intensification over these last, as I called, from July to December is going to be so stark and so ferocious that it should start to wake people up. And as we progress through 2019 to 2020, your reality is actually going to break, because the weather that we're going to experience in the climate and the shifts is going to be so out of bounds. Everything's a 200-year, everything's a 400-year storm that, well, you might just start to question this IPCC narrative, which, by the way, they're calling for socialism/communism as a way to dismantle capitalism because we need to save the planet from runaway global warming. They're still calling a 1.5 degrees C rise in the next 80 years. But they were saying that since the 1980s. A lot of people using Facebook, a lot of people using social media. It's going to be going something like this. This is my own opinion on how it's going to play out. I've said the same thing for a couple of years. That as we get closer to these crop losses where it really affects your life, where prices are going to go up 50% or even double, at that point they're really going to need to start to taking away voices in the social media that can explain to you what's going on and really why all these things are happening. You know, even these tidbits of information that I'm talking about, this is a shift in the intertropical convergence zone. In the very near future, they're going to try to curtail this flow of info of why the climate is changing so much, and really that we're in a multi-century cycle, how it's going to affect your lives. And once you know how it will affect you, you can start to see why they're starting to begin to censor a lot of media. We're here on Zero Hedge. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this site. It's one of the best on the net. This was formed after the 2008 crisis. Some economists and traders got together and said, you know, you guys had lied to those people. Those people lost their homes, jobs, livelihoods. And we're going to start our own site over here for you to follow the economic news that we see. So I would consider this the real economic news, not what you see on CNBC, NBC, etc. So I'm over here on zerohedge.com. Facebook purging 800 accounts, tens of millions of viewers. subscribers. And you know what they're placing it at? You violated terms of service. Now, I don't understand what this is all about. These pages have been up for 5-6 years, since day one. 2.5 million, 3 million followers, Free Thought Project, instantly removed. And there's a list, and it does go on and on and on. 5 years of building fans, millions of followers, and then for some reason, all of them erased overnight while they slept. Now, this occurred, probably 2 or 3 a.m., so people wouldn't get together instantly when they saw their accounts go down. It's a Friday of all things, no less. Couldn't happen on a Monday now, could it have? Had to wait until the weekend, so a lot of businesses are closed. Sorry, you can't call. Sorry, we can't follow up until next week. So we take a look here at the rundown. Dan Dix, PFT, Press for Truth. And as I was reading the list, I was shocked because I've done an interview with a couple people who were banned here, so that makes me think just a little bit about Right Wing News and Michael DePinto. He and I talked about how the economy is going to crash about a year before the food shortages start, because if they can crash the economy, they can prevent mass movement of population around the planet. This winter is going to be so severe that I do believe a power grid is going to go down somewhere in the Northern Hemisphere, especially maybe in North America. And I also believe that a city is going to be locked in, as it was in the blizzard conditions of nonstop snow, tens of feet of snow like Buffalo experienced in the 1970s. These are two of my calls for this year: power grid down and city blockaded due to too much snow. As these events begin to unfurl and happen, people are going to start to put 2 and 2 together as we move forward into 2019, 2020. A lot of people that are either single or just a couple married without children, they'll be able to move with their resources. They have money. They can just pull it out of the bank. They can cash in their stocks, bonds, sell their house, whatever, and then just move to a different place. And as I've said, that's fine for now. But governments are going to start limiting migration across the planet as too many people tidal wave into these warmer climates. People who have a big enough following that they could say something alternative to what you're seeing in the corporate mainstream media. Somebody with 1 million followers, those people follow that person because they believe the person's fact so much that they take the time to follow. They take the time to come back to the site. They take the time to watch the videos because they believe that person so much that they're a fan, compared to if you see a talking head on a corporate media program. I know people love their favorite personality on NBC, CBS, NBC, whatever it is. I should say the closeness of the relationship and the trust built in to a social media personality that purveys whatever message it is. It could be anything. Whatever it is, they have a tighter connection to that person than just random somebody on a network TV show. You can actually write them. Sometimes they write you back. So think about anybody who had 1 million followers, 500,000 followers on YouTube. They have a pretty good presence inside Facebook. I didn't work on Facebook for quite some time until just last year, and then I have somebody to run that social media for me. And I've only been able to grow it to about 5,000 followers after this last 8 months of having somebody post continually up there. So when I see somebody with 2.1 million followers, 3.1 million followers, I'm thinking, man, they have a huge reach. Because I only have 65,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I only have 5,000 following on YouTube, a couple thousand on Twitter. But still, the message I purvey out gets out because people share it. These people are going to have a lot of sway into the incredible fake news that the mainstream media is running. If you really believe that it's not an all-out effort to sway the opinion, I'm sorry, you're not in reality. They're trying to remove all types of voices, which is kind of scary because, Lenin, I'm going to quote loosely here, socialism is to usher in communism. And what we're seeing right now is a full-on push to move into socialism in the United States. And I'm talking about little brown shirts, shock troops, which are the students, which we saw over in China. And, I don't talk about my past too much. I told you I was a coffee buyer in Myanmar, and that's the reason I started my Adapt 2030 YouTube channel, because I saw the changes of cold weather damage to the coffee crops in Burma. It's not a mid-latitude location. It's tropical. And when we started losing coffee plantings down there and talking to the coffee farmers, well, not the farms, they said it was a third year in a row cold damage. So I started looking into it. We were trying to forecast out 5 years to see if we could expand our allocation. Could we prepay for more plantings? It's the way they do it. If you want to put out new production, you generally need to at least pay for the seeds, the labor for them to get it into the nursery out there, grow those plants out to about a foot, and then, have somebody pay to put them out, plant the acreage. It's not like you just call a coffee farm and say, hey, we want 20 new acres for us, okay, thanks, we'll pick it up when it's ready. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to pay for that. Same with the honey in Myanmar. If you want to have honey production, and you want to get in, extra 5 or 10 tons of honey, you need to pay for them to build the bee boxes and then put them out. After it's harvest, then you chop off the cost of the initial investment. That's how it works down there. And with that said, I worked in China for several years. I was a factory acquisition agent. That was my first job in Asia. I went to university in China to learn Mandarin Chinese to work because I saw the whole progression of the economy out east, out to Asia. When I lived there, I got a real good introduction to how the Cultural Revolution worked, how they used the students to enforce the rules from above. And there was really no, shall we say, one single finger that could be pointed to, because Mao kept himself off to the sideline, as in, I'm not the one making the students do all this. His wife was, the Gang of Four was, that was four of these other high-level politicians. And what they did was they gave the go-ahead to professors in the universities at the time to indoctrinate the students for about 7 years into this new socialist ideology of everything in the past is bad. Just like we saw with the Civil War statues, etc. They did the exact same thing in China. They talked about, the archaic past where we had emperors and we had palaces, and that was just so barbaric and archaic, and the bourgeois, rich capitalists ruined the country and we need to get rid of them. And they taught this in the school for, I'm going to say 7 to 8 years, like hardcore. It was promoted from the top. It was promoted in the education bureaus, and they let it go. And once they had the students up to the point where they went into university, that whole trickle-down, dripple-down effect was going still into the schooling system as they were coming up, but it was rolling back even further, into middle schools at that point. Teachers are bad, they're educated, they're trying to wash your brain to accept capitalism. It wasn't really capitalism, it was more about, maybe you don't have to everybody have one loaf of bread for the day. Maybe we can develop different industries and then we can go our own ways, kind of like free will, something like that. But they rallied the troops. And they all carried these little red books. Xiao Hong Bun is what they called it, the little red book with Mao's ideologies in it. And you know what? When I went back to America, I just got back. I spent 3 weeks back in the States. Just flew back a few days ago, still jet lagged when I'm talking to you. I saw a lot of the very same exact things going on. It scares me a little bit. Because I was telling the stories about what I'd experienced and people I knew that were rounded up. People personally that I knew that her parents or his parents got put in labor camps because they were teachers. They were doctors, but they were educated. They were rounded up and put in a labor camp, but they were given a good position because they could provide medical care. But still, they had free thought because they were educated. And then they started to use all the students one night to just start enforcing. Started with the newspaper, started with the magazine. They were allowed to go in and ransack the offices, break the machines, burn them down, drag the owners out, pour inks on their head, kill some of them, and put them in camps and trucks and truck them off, and they were never seen again. This is what I see with this Facebook purge and with the purge across the social media. And where does it come? Where now social media companies can dictate what you can say or what you can talk about. They're the gatekeepers of all the information now. This takes us right back to Mao Zedong, 1950s and 60s, squarely in the center of China. It's just digital now. It's no different. The students in America are being organized as shock troops in this new socialist movement. And you see all these professors, they're so far off the left that they're into the communist thinking. They're not even socialist. They claim they're socialist, but barely. So we're starting to see the beginnings. I truly believe we're going into a cultural revolution in the United States. Any other part of the world listening, You're looking into our country, seeing the exact same thing because your news feeds are way different from what I was getting when I was back there. Living in Asia, I have a completely different look at what's happening in the United States versus living there. And going back and seeing how the news was given to the local people, the citizens of the U.S. it's such a different, they're trying to disguise and mask all of this socialist movement in the States, but outside it's quite open and known what's going on. But I want to take you over to the new IPCC report here. Now I'm working on this as a story. Let me dig it up. I was shocked and flabbergasted listening and watching this. What they're really talking about here in the new IPCC report is dismantling capitalism to try to protect the planet. Again, this goes back into the shock troops of having the students mobilize across the planet to usher in and do the arrests. That way there's nobody in power that's culpable. Oh, it was a student movement that got out of control. Sure it was. Oh, we couldn't rein in the students. There's too many of them. There's tens of millions of students across the U.S. Have you seen the run-up what all these professors are letting go in the classrooms? If you've even been sort of paying attention, you know what's happening in the universities across the United States. Now here's Eric Holthaus. He's used to write for the Wall Street Journal, and he's a climate guy now. He does a show. He's a climate forecaster, and he's got his own television program, local station. And he's tweeting out here, if you're wondering what you can do about climate change, rigorous backing has just been given to systematically dismantle capitalism. I mean, if you're looking for something to do, he gets a venue on Facebook and Twitter, yet the other guys with conservative messages are shut down. That makes no sense. He's supporting full-on return to communism from capitalism, and he's given a full voice. Excellent. You can see where the agenda lies and where we're moving in the future. Now, what does this all have to do, though, with the climate change IPCC? Now, where does this politics and return back to communism, how did that suddenly get into the new IPCC report? This is in Chapter 4 of the final government draft, SR 1.5 IPCC, Chapter 4. This is for this year that would be coming out. Now, they also talked a little bit about cooling as well. They talked about global cooling on the way due to too much CO2, causing more clouds and then causing more snow. It's in the new IPCC report. They're talking about cooling. You should be watching out. Al Gore told us we'd never know what snow was again. They told us in the beginning we would boil like frogs slowly. We would never know what snow was. And here they've reversed themselves 180 completely as we get into the American snow globe. There is so much record snow. British Columbia breaking records back 40 years, cold and snow. Western part of the United States, Rocky Mountain areas, completely blanketed, record snows. Ski resorts are opening early. And they were telling us we would never see snow again. I want to come to this one chapter here. I think it's incredibly important for what's going on and how they're going to try to control the narrative. And if you question anything, they're going to try to control you. They've been following the social media quite closely. They have lists of people who frequently comment on boards. They have been, social engineering you to come for you when the time is right. And if you think I'm insane and I'm some conspiracy theorist, this is now all open record on what they're planning. It's just now in play because Facebook did the first purge. Those are the first tier voices. What happens to second tier voices? Third tier voices? What happens if you start to communicate outside these venues and you get a big following again? The students are aware who these larger people are, who they communicate with in their local communities. It's broken down by city, and they're going to be coming out. And the nail on the top is the IPCC is now fully with the United Nations pushing that this is an okay thing to purge people because they're using too many resources and they will not be re-educated to use less resources. In the beginning, it says a climate-friendly allocation of public investments and a redirection of wealth of 5 to 10% of annual capital revenues is necessary to build a climate-resilient infrastructure. It continues on. After that, it's going to require an evolution of global and national financial systems. How are they going to facilitate this? They're going to limit your access to capital. They're going to redirect capital away from potential stranded assets. They're going to institute, or they're trying to, and I kid you not, here we go, $240 US per gallon gasoline tax. And you think I'm kidding? Now, China's skyrocketing coal power. I mean, they're using so much coal up there, using what? 2,000 million tons, 2 billion tons a year, and the United States is at 500 million. Yet they're telling the United States citizens that they can't have energy anymore. And if you don't kowtow to their demands, that they will summarily remove you from the sphere of your consumption. It's kind of gnarly and scary what they're talking about here. What do you think that would do to the global economy if they do institute even, okay, let's say half of that, $110 or $120 US gallon tax for fuel? There would be zero commerce. Zero. People would create their own biofuels, but then, of course, the government would step in and say, you can't create your own fuel. Unbeknownst to myself, until I really started to look into making some biofuel and helping others and watching the process and getting my feet wet. If you make over a certain amount, 100 gallons in the U.S., you then have to pay the United States government 25 to 50 cents, depending on which state you're in, and then you have to pay another 48 cents to the local governments, again, depending on what state you're in. This is for Tennessee. So even if you make your own fuel, you're still going to have to pay over $1 in taxes back to the government and the local, state, and the federal government just for producing your own fuel that you grow your own, say, corn or soybean on your own property. There's a lot of other biofuels out there too. You can use moringa or whatever you can get oil from. Even if you produce your own, you must still pay taxes on that. We're not free. So as I've been saying, as we move down the road of intense losses in the crops, the stranglehold of what you're seeing in the social media and the way to communicate between people is going to continue to be further strangleholded, if that's a proper word, because they will not want you truly purveying the truth of why this is happening. They're going to continue to try to push this IPCC reversal to communism/socialism, reduction in population, re-education fiasco, because the weather is absolutely going to fall out, and it is falling out at the moment across the planet. If you have not seen the changes that are upon us, it is happening everywhere, exponentially, all at the same time. Now, this was, predicted with Valentina Zarkova, Popoff, Shepard, and Zarkov's work, along with John Casey and so many others. Dr. Abu Zamatov from the Apulkovo Observatory, Rolf Wiche. The names just keep rolling off. They want to try to control the narrative of why it's happening. Because if they can say you're still responsible for it, even though it's a cycle in the sun, because people are going to get really scared. As soon as these weather changes amplify next year, you're going to see things we haven't seen in centuries, really centuries, if not millennia. And people are going to be very frightened as to what's going on. And this will be the IPCC's golden moment to snatch up and get the students to take action. And then we'll have a repeat of what we saw in the shock troop movement of the Cultural Revolution in China, using the students to enforce. They're going to try to control every excuse that's coming out of why this weather is changing.